Ahead for us on this Friday, impeachment ending. The Speaker of the State Assembly says the Constitution demands it once the governor resigns. A legal expert will give us his take on that and help us understand how all of this is going to work. Plus, crunching the numbers, the census painting an interesting picture of how Buffalo and Western New York as a whole are changing. The big takeaways with a live guest. And as the Bills get ready to open the preseason tonight in Detroit, we're going to be talking with Vic Carucci about that game and some new reporting about that new stadium for the team. And thank you for joining us for the Town Hall tonight, everybody. I'm Michael Wooten. Kate is off. We're going to start with the story that developed just a few hours ago and the announcement that the Assembly will end its impeachment investigation of Governor Cuomo due to his resignation. Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie put out a statement that caught some off guard. He said in part, "Let me be clear, the committee's work over the last several months, although not complete, did uncover credible evidence in relation to allegations that have been made in reference to the governor. This evidence, we believe, could likely have resulted in articles of impeachment had he not resigned." Heastie said attorneys advised him that the Constitution for New York State does not allow for the impeachment of someone who is no longer in office. Joining us live right now to talk about that is Jim Gardner, a UB Law School professor and an expert on the state constitution. You've helped us out a lot lately as we've kind of navigated these uncharted waters. We appreciate you coming on for short notice.
Glad to be with you.
So we knew that this was a possibility in terms of the legal issues here because there have been questions about whether or not this could move forward if the governor was no longer in office. I asked a Republican member of the Judiciary Committee about that when I was in Albany earlier this week. Listen to what she said. Once he leaves office, can an impeachment inquiry even continue?
Well, I'm not sure. That's one of the questions that we're going to have for our attorneys. The purpose of the impeachment, in part, besides accountability, which is most important to me, would be that as a consequence, he could be barred from holding statewide public office in the future.
So, Professor, do you agree with the legal justification that was provided by the Speaker's office today that the state constitution simply, wouldn't allow this to proceed once Governor Cuomo leaves office? And can you kind of walk us through that justification for those of us who are non-attorneys?
Sure. Yeah, I thought they did a really nice job. It was compact. It was persuasive. It starts with the text of the Constitution, which links, unlike the federal Constitution, links disqualification to removal. So the suggestion in the text, first and foremost, is that disqualification from office is something that would happen only in accompanying a removal from office. They also look at the history, and the history is pretty one-sided. They couldn't find any prior examples either in New York or in other states of an impeachment going forward after an official has resigned. So on the grounds of text and historical practice, all those pointers seem to be pointing in the same direction.
People obviously want answers about all this. A lot of taxpayer money has already been spent on this investigation. Impeachment aside, what would keep the committee or any other committee from continuing the probe and, using subpoena power and then, just releasing a full bipartisan report at the end of it so we could all find out the truth?
Yeah, a report is a different matter altogether. A report is something that a legislative committee has the authority to do. It relates to the development of ideas, perhaps for future legislation or future constitutional amendments. And so a full report that informs the public would be a public service, but it would not be related to impeachment. It wouldn't rely on the impeachment powers to move forward.
But there is nothing that would prevent even just the standing Judiciary Committee right now from continuing on and maybe just instead of calling this an impeachment probe, they could just call it a, part of their work as the committee.
Yeah, it would be an investigation into misconduct by the governor that would not result in impeachment, but would simply be in the form of a report. Sure, they can do that.
We will continue to follow it. Jim Gardner is the Bridget and Thomas Black SUNY Distinguished Professor at the University at Buffalo Law School. Thanks for helping us understand this. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next here on the Town Hall tonight, we want to dig deeper into the news that we got from the census yesterday and really a changing Western New York. New numbers showing that Buffalo gained population over the past decade for the first time in 70 years. Erie County also gained while all of our other counties lost population. And the census showed that Buffalo, like the rest of the country, is getting less white with growth due to an influx of immigrants and refugees. Joining us live right now to talk about that is someone who's been crunching the numbers on all of this. Russell Weaver is the Director of Research at Cornell University's ILR Buffalo CoLab. I know that you've really been taking a close look at this data. We appreciate you sharing your expertise.
Yes, thank you for having me. So as you said,
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's just start with the general trends and what you've seen, especially when it comes to the diversity of Buffalo and how that's changed over the past decade. What sticks out to you?
Sure. So diversity has increased really across the board throughout the county, but particularly in Buffalo, including especially east of Main Street. So there's been a large increase in terms of relative size of the population of persons who identify as Asian Americans. Relative to 10 years ago, the relative size of the Asian American population more than doubled. And we also saw a sharp increase in the number of individuals who identify as Hispanic or Latinx. And so diversity is increasing again everywhere, but most prominently on the east side of Buffalo, and then in some of the surrounding suburban communities like the town of Tonawanda and Cheektowaga.
Yeah, wondering about that racial diversity change, not just in the city, but also in the suburbs and some of the reasons why. I mean, we've talked a lot about how Buffalo and Western New York has really been welcoming to refugees and to immigrants. I know that there have been some changes at the federal level, and we're not seeing as much of that coming now. If it weren't for that, our population growth will be a lot smaller, or we might even be in the negative, right?
Absolutely, that's a safe bet. So it's hard to tell with the data that just came out yesterday because that doesn't provide us with any information on citizenship or country of origin. So we don't necessarily know. But again, given just the anecdotes and a lot of what we know from past media coverage is that, yes, it's populations of new Americans that have really propelled our population growth, as well as other communities of color. So looking at just the two big trends in population, how you get population change, either through natural increases where birth rates exceed death rates or through in-migration. The white population has been down really negative in terms of natural change with death rates exceeding birth rates, but all other communities of color that are tracked by the Census Bureau have been positive in that regard and significantly positive in terms of in-migration. And so that's what's driving a lot of our growth.
When you look for context surrounding all of these numbers, it's important to note that our population increase is small percentage-wise, but it is still growth. And after so many years of losing population, it's a big change. And you wonder about things, though, when we have more people than we did before, housing vacancies and population density, I guess, where people are going.
Yeah, so that's a great point, and I'll just add to that too. So while it is a small growth percentage-wise, a lot of demographers were forecasting another decade of marginal population loss. So the fact that it did come in positive and at about plus 17,000 for the city of Buffalo is definitely significant. Now, in terms of where we're seeing gains, positively inside the city of Buffalo, some of the fastest growth rates or some of the largest growth rates decade to decade are in those areas east of Main Street that have suffered from chronic disinvestment. And so while that's a good sign that you're seeing population growth there and potentially new persons to come in and invest in housing, that is going to put upward pressure on housing prices. Sort of what you were getting at, that if we're getting more people into an already hot housing market, that is going to be an area of concern going forward and something certainly to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's broaden out a little bit. We've talked a lot about the city of Buffalo. Erie County also gained population, whereas all of our other counties lost. When you kind of do all of the math, we still gained enough because Erie County, in terms of just raw numbers, had enough new people to make up for the losses in other places. But what kind of conclusions do you draw based on that all of the gains were in Erie County in terms of Western New York?
Yeah, so Erie County is, when you look at the two-county Buffalo-Niagara region, it's really Erie County that was responsible for our growth. And that was actually consistent with what a lot of demographers were forecasting. So the current predictions are that Niagara County is on pace to still continue losing population, so to see net outmigration for about the next 10 years, through about 2030. Not a lot, but enough to have continued population loss. Where in Erie County, we saw growth again in the city. So we saw urban growth again for the first time in 70 years, which is something positive. But we also saw growth in a lot of the outer ring suburbs and in communities like Clarence and Lancaster, places that have strong school districts, that have high demand for folks coming in. So Yeah, Erie County as a population center here in Western New York was really the reason that we saw regional growth this time around.
Yeah, and it really is encouraging to see growth not only in the city, not only in the suburbs, but at least in both. So it's not like people are just moving from one area to the other. We're actually growing. Russell Weaver, the Director of Research at Cornell University's ILR Buffalo CoLab. There are a lot of numbers. We don't oftentimes get all the context that we need surrounding all this data. So thank you so much for helping us understand it.
Thank you for having me. Take care.